News Radio 1000 KTOK. Gwin Faulconer-Lippert here with you on this Sunday evening. Well, it's time for another update. And this next week, the session starts at 23rd and Lincoln. And as you know, there are many, many people that are interested in this upcoming session. But one particular group, a group that I am particularly interested in, is PIKE off OTA. Randy Carter joins me this evening. He is the Director of Strategic Communication for No More Turnpikes Facebook page and is joining me this evening by telephone. It's a big week out at 23rd and Lincoln, isn't it, Randy?
Oh, absolutely. The governor starts things off with his State of the State message, and then the legislative session opens. Yes, so it should be a big week. I haven't paid a lot of attention to the legislative session recently, but because of this new turnpike proposal, I am certainly well aware of the possibilities available to us working with the legislature. Absolutely.
So let's hope people know about this, but just in case, the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority has proposed new turnpikes, 3 of which will go through Cleveland County, and it is called, I have to be careful here, Access Oklahoma. And, of course, what it means is they're going to build these roads that you will pay to drive on. But even more of interest to Randy Carter and the Pike off OTA people is the fact that they are coming for their property and will build these turnpikes through residential areas that have been in families for hundreds of years. So, Randy, where are we right now? Because it seems like there was a big development since the last time we talked.
Well, absolutely there was. The Oklahoma Turnpike Authority in their south leg or south extension and the east-west connector. The east-west connector basically follows a line through Cleveland County along Indian Hills going east and west, and the southern extension basically goes from where the Kickapoo hits I-40 down around Lake Thunderbird, just west of Lake Thunderbird, and connecting to I-35 just north of Purcell. And in that proposal, the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority needed to cross over lands around Lake Thunderbird. And Lake Thunderbird is actually owned by a federal agency called the Bureau of Reclamation. And it's managed by an organization called the Central Oklahoma Master Conservancy District. That's a mouthful, I know. But and they manage the lake, or the water properties of the lake for the Bureau of Reclamation. In order for the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority to cross lands owned by the Bureau of Reclamation, they had to make an application to do so. And I believe they applied for that back in August. Well, in just in the middle of January, I believe around the 18th, the Bureau of Reclamation, in fact, I have the document that includes the AOT's application, a 46-page document. Basically, the Bureau of Reclamation denied the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority the right to cross what they call fee title lands. I know that sounds like a mouthful, but basically what that means is that the Turnpike Authority will not be able to use the lands that are owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. They denied it because it doesn't fit the proposals, or it does not fit the perpetual use of the fee title lands, and it's not in compliance with their authorized purposes and with the public or the United States in interests in what they call the Norman Project, which is Lake Thunderbird.
So were they saying, was the Bureau of Reclamation saying it's a watershed and putting a highway through it is not smart, or am I reading that into it?
Well, there were a number of factors that the Bureau of Reclamation considered with the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority's application. And let me see if I can find some of those. I've got the document right here, so it's going to take me just a second. I didn't have that page marked. But what they do, they consider in a lot of areas. One of the is wildlife, water quality, the public use of the land, and how it affects the water supply. Because Lake Thunderbird is the municipal water supply for Norman, Dell City, and Midwest City. But basically, if you look at the map that the Bureau of Reclamation generated showing the Turnpike Authority's proposed routes, in a couple of places on the southern extension, mostly, it goes right through the lake and land that is owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. So that is what they declined the use on. The Bureau of Reclamation also has land surrounding what they own, but they have an easement on it. It's still owned privately, but the people that own it are not allowed to do certain things that might affect the quality of the lake. So at this point, I'm not sure whether the Turnpike Authority is going to have to move it just outside the fee title lands that the Bureau of Reclamation owns, or completely outside of any of their easements as well. So there's still a lot up in the air. And also in the application, or in the denial, there's a sentence in there that said the OTA could actually reapply. So again, this was a major victory for our side at this point, but that doesn't mean they couldn't come back with a new and better proposal and maybe get approval. So,
well, one of the things that struck my heart about this was, yes, it seemed like a victory, but those of you that felt victorious were not feeling victorious. Yes, I mean, it's paused for now, but it could mean that it's just moved a few miles one way or the other. And I was struck by the genuine heart that No More Turnpikes has, or Pike Off OTA has, for anyone that possibly could have a turnpike go through their property and take away their land.
Yes, well, and destroy their homes as well. Looking at the map, if indeed they decide to stick with this similar route, right now, where it affects me directly is it goes between 72nd and 84th, from Franklin Road down to almost Etowah Road in between Noble and Norman. And looking at the map, if they decide to stick with this basic route, they would have to move it west, probably up to a mile to avoid the fee lands, and probably 2 or 2.5 miles to the west to avoid the easements. So if that's what they do, that's going to affect a whole new group of people who are going to be equally devastated by the potential loss of their homes. So, it's like I told you before, it feels like the sword of Damocles hanging over our heads. We never know if that hair is going to break and the sword is going to smash down and destroy our homes and our lives. And now it's potentially going to affect a whole new group of people. And I don't wish that on anybody. It's almost a year now. We found out in February of 2022, and it's coming up on a year now. And it's been a tough year for those of us that have been in this path and
yes.
trying to fight the fight.
Now, aren't you all having a special event?
Yes, we're celebrating the anniversary of our potential demise. Yes, on the 21st of February, we're having an event at the 405 Brewery here in Norman. I think it starts at 5:30 to 7, I believe, are the times. But we're going to be talking about the things that we're doing, and our legislative activities will have kicked in by then. And we have a new name we're going by, our new group, a new plan where we are now Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation in our governmental affairs. So
Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm writing it down. And where will I see that name appear, by the way?
Well, it'll mostly be in information that we share with the legislators and in our lobbying efforts to try to get this Oklahoma Turnpike Authority reined in and a little bit under control, doing things correctly. And there's a number of bills that we have helped author or helped legislators to author that might be able to bring in a little bit of control over this out of control agency.
Right. So before we lose our listeners, because they think that we're just feeling sorry for people that are in the way of progress, there's so much more to this issue. Yes, it is tragic that they are taking your homes, but there's so much more to this issue than we have even started to touch upon. I'm going to have to take a commercial break, but when we come back, I would like for you to lay out why I call it excess Oklahoma, and it's called access, but I call it excess Oklahoma, and there's a good reason behind it. And you are just the man. Randy Carter is the Director of Strategic Communication for now the Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation. He wants to explain to you what the Turnpike Authority is really doing. And I think as a concerned citizen of Oklahoma, you are going to want to know this, because don't think that just because you don't live in Cleveland County, you are safe from the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. And he will explain that to all of us. Isn't that right, Randy?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Okay. Everybody stick around. I'm Gwin Faulconer-Lippert. You're listening to 1000 KTOK. Talking to Randy Carter from PIKE Off OTA, or Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation. We are talking about a turnpike program that has been proposed called Access Oklahoma. Randy Carter, however, thinks that it's more. I call it excess Oklahoma. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Randy Carter, but you think it is accessible, correctly? Not accessible, but accessible.
Well, I think it's perfect. I think it's unnecessary, and I think there's a lot of reasons that it shouldn't go through, one being the watershed. But again, we've talked about this, and I know I've spoken to some legislators about it, and actually one of them used the term Ponzi scheme. But what we have discovered is that the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, when they are proposing a new turnpike, they hire a particular firm to run the numbers to predict how much traffic will come through, which talks about how much revenue they should be able to generate. And then the bonds are sold based on those projections. But yet, throughout the history of the Turnpike Authority, those projections have only been 63% accurate. And like I said before, when I was in school, a 63 was an F. So what happens is they sell these bonds based on a prediction number that doesn't come anywhere close to bringing in the revenue that they project. So that means basically these new turnpikes are unable to pay their own way. So then they have to generate new turnpike routes to bring in more bonds to pay off the bonds they can't pay off already, and kick the can down the road to future generations to have to pay off these bonds. But Gwin, speaking of bonds, here's an interesting item, and it just happens to have occurred on this date in this year. Back in August, the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority proposed to issue up to $500 million in bonds. But in order to do that, every state agency or instrumentality has to go before the Council of Bond Oversight to get approval on those bonds. They basically make sure the applications are correct and a number of other steps that you have to go through to make sure it's done correctly. But one of the boxes that has to be checked is that if there are any lawsuits pending against the agency, then that can't be approved. And actually, what it says in the Turnpike Authority's particular application back in August is that in order for the Bond Council on Oversight, that's a mouthful too, but in order for them to approve this bond issuance, one of the items says it has to be the resolution or dismissal of the following litigation in favor of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, the case of Pike Off, and the Open Meetings Violation Act case. And back in the first part of December, Judge Timothy Olson ruled by summary judgment, which I think is a little bit unusual, that the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority willfully violated the Oklahoma Open Meetings Act. So that means right there that the bond oversight approval is invalid. They're not going to be able to approve these bonds because that case was resolved against the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. And what's interesting is that this application for these bonds to go through had to be approved within 180 days from the council's action, which happens to be February the 5th, 2023, which if I check my calendar, that is today.
Today!
Yes. So that means that the application by the Turnpike Authority for these bonds to be approved is invalid. So they're going to have to start all over, evidently. But since the access program has been ruled invalid by their violation of the Open Meetings Act, they really have, I mean, it's moot. This stuff is done as far as it looks like to me.
Well, didn't every reasonable person thought the contracts were moot too, but then they went back and reapproved them all scurryingly right before New Year's, right? Yes.
Yeah, the day after New Year's. It was their January 2nd. Yeah, right after that 2-week holiday. Yes. I believe we talked about that last time I was on, Gwen. It was nothing but political theater, in my opinion.
Yes.
They opened up public comment. I think the decision had already been made before the meeting agenda was even proposed and posted. I think it's either 24 or 48 hours before the meeting is when that agenda has to be posted. But a number of us got up and spoke in front of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, and they smiled and nodded at us, but went ahead and voted the way they'd already decided they were going to vote before the meeting even started. That's just my opinion, and I mean, there's no proof that that's what happened. That's just the way it felt, that it was an exercise in futility for us to get up and even address them on anything. But the access program has been ruled invalid by the judgment of willfully violating the Oklahoma Open Meetings Act. So how can they approve contracts for a program that's invalid?
That is a great question, and we will pick it up right there. And how can the Supreme Court ever rule on this if they are invalid? And he is explaining to me the recent developments that have taken place as a result of the various lawsuits and findings of judges about a program called Access Oklahoma. Now, if you want to know in shorthand what that means, it's Access Oklahoma, because Pike Off OTA has made a very strong case that we don't need all the turnpikes they think they are saying that we need. And there were several things that you said, Randy, that caught my attention. One was that one legislator called it a Ponzi scheme, where they take in money now to pay off bonds that they haven't paid off from previous projects. Isn't that what it is?
Yes, that's the way. That's the way it appears to us. We've had some people that have done some pretty deep digging into the financials of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, and it looks like, it's conceivable that they might even be insolvent in 2023, based on some of our research. I am not the person doing that research, so I'm not an expert on it, but they have a number of bonds coming due in 2023. And it's our belief that that's one of the reasons that they're proposing these new turnpikes, is to create to put more toll roads into place to show that they're generating more revenue that the bonds will support, so actually that they can pay off the bonds that their current operations are unable to pay off through their regular revenues.
And as I understand it, when these turnpikes were first created, the very first ones and all that, they were proposed with the understanding that when those bonds are paid, those highways would be free. And then something called cross-pledging, I believe, came into being, which said, we'll take the money from this toll road to build another toll road. So, I mean, it almost sounds like a marketing scheme, doesn't it?
Yes, indeed. And interestingly enough, you are correct. As I understand it, when the Turner was first built, that was supposed to be paid off within a number of years. But the voters of Oklahoma voted on a state question to allow this cross-pledging. So it has changed since the initial proposals of the Turnpike Authority in its beginning stages. And one of the bills, I believe there's a bill before the legislature now to end cross-pledging. I don't know how far that will go, but there's a number of bills that our group is certainly, our Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation are certainly interested in and supporting in front of the legislature, and will continue our volunteer efforts to lobby our legislators. Interestingly enough, did I ever tell you where the term lobbying came from?
Tell me.
Back when Ulysses S. Grant was president, they were remodeling the White House, and he had to live in the hotel across the street, and everybody that wanted to come to see him had to wait in the lobby. So that's where the term lobbying got started, from my understanding. Anyway, that's off the subject, Gwen. Sorry. So
currently, there are these bills in the legislature that are being presented on behalf of the Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation. We'll talk about that name and why it's so correct. But there also is another lawsuit pending by, is it PIKE that filed the other lawsuit?
The KTOK lawsuit you're talking about? No, that has not been filed by. That's been filed by Stan Ward and Richard LaBarth and Alexei Tarasov. They are the ones that filed the open meetings violation lawsuit and won that. Now, recently, the Turnpike Authority said that they were going to appeal that. So the appeal process is evidently beginning as well. But because those contracts were ruled invalid by the judge's ruling on the open meetings violation suit, the money that was paid out on those illicit contracts since I believe February or March, those monies should be returned by those engineering firms back to the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. And the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority is taking no action on that whatsoever. So that was the reason that the KTOK lawsuit is filed. It's a method that citizens can use to collect monies that were illegally or irresponsibly paid out by state agencies, as I understand it.
Now, will the KTOK also hold hostage the Access Oklahoma plan from having the state Supreme Court issue or validate the bonds being let?
I don't know whether that will have an effect on the Supreme Court or not. We've been waiting quite some time for them to decide. I believe that the hearing on that suit that you're talking about occurred back in the early part of December, and we still haven't heard anything. I think the Supreme Court took a long holiday break, but I understand that they have released some rulings on some other cases that were pending, but we've heard nothing on the bond authorization. But even if they do authorize the bonds, the Council on Bond Oversight requirements still have not been met. So even if the state Supreme Court validates those bonds, there's still other hoops that the Turnpike Authority has to jump through before those bonds can be authorized. So there's a lot of gum in the works for them at this point, it appears.
You are so right. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the legislation that the Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation are submitting through the legislature. This is the first week of the legislature will meet, and Governor Stitt will make his presentation on all of that, the state of the state. It'll be interesting to see if he talks about turnpikes, won't it, in his state of the state. But
Yes.
these bills, are they inclusive of everything from reorganizing the Turnpike Authority, possibly separating the Secretary of Transportation from the Secretary of the Turnpike Authority or Director or whatever the title is? I mean, are you going for a total reorganization, perhaps?
There's all kinds of bills. And again, I PIKE OTA and Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation can't take credit for all of these bills. We have been involved in helping with some of the language on some of these bills, but there's quite a few. And in fact, it seems to me that there's quite a bit of displeasure with a number of legislators concerning the Turnpike Authority. I believe there's a bill. Senator Shane Jett has filed a bill, SB 1079. Sunsetting existing locations authorizations unless the construction has occurred within 5 years. So that means that in fact, this is a completely, if you remember that T-shirt I brought the first time I came in,
yes,
shows all these turnpikes all over the state, and people should get on our website, pikeofota.com, and check out these places that turnpikes could be built because they have been authorized at one time or another. This particular bill by Senator Jett would require that if those turnpikes are not constructed within the first 5 years of them being authorized, that they would no longer be authorized. That's the sunset bill. That we certainly support, and that would have an effect on the bills or the three legs to Norman. Of course, we don't think the southern extension has even ever been authorized by the legislature.
We'll stop with that comment. Has not been ever authorized.
That's the lawsuit that PIKE OTA has filed, and that is in front of the Supreme Court right now on the bond authorizations. The lawyers, Rob Norman specifically, testified or spoke in front of the Supreme Court on PIKE OTA's behalf in an attempt to convince the Supreme Court that the southern leg has never been authorized, and that the east-west connector and the Tri-City connector were authorized under a bond issue that stated that those legs had to be completed under one bond issue back in 1987. And those are under consideration by the state Supreme Court at this time. And that's the ruling that we are waiting on that is involved with the state Supreme Court's authorization of these proposed turnpikes and the bond issuance. So
I want to go back to the T-shirt, because the first night you came up here, you brought me a T-shirt, and you are right. People would be, I hope, appalled, but certainly amazed at the number of possible routes that the Turnpike Authority is considering in our state. And I want to commend you all that you want to involve citizens from all across the state, because really no one is safe. One of the first things you said to me that made a big impact was, Gwin, I like turnpikes. I like to drive on turnpikes when they're needed or when they're positive for our state. But to bail out the Turnpike Authority by claiming we need more turnpikes in places that don't have the population or the traffic, that's not right.
Yes, I agree totally. Well, and one of the interesting things that the Turnpike Authority is saying is that we need these turnpikes to relieve safety issues on I-35. In fact, they are claiming that the section that is relative to these new turnpikes, there's 5 accidents per day on I-35. from our research and from our discovery, we can only find record that shows 0.3 accidents per day on that stretch of highway. So something is amiss here. I don't know whether that is. I don't know where they're getting their figures. They are claiming that safety is an issue here, but yet we don't find those numbers that they're proposing is what's going on I-35. And I don't know whether that's willful intent or lack of competence or what, but we just don't see that we can't find the numbers anywhere that show that there's 5 accidents per day. And 0.3 is a lot different than 5 per day.
And when you say we, you have engineers, you have lawyers, you have all people from all professions looking at this, not just the Turnpike Authority and the engineers that will profit from making these highways.
That is correct. Yes, we have a lot of interested parties that have a lot of expertise in a lot of areas. A couple of our people are college professors that are maybe actually, we have some that are engineers that deal with transportation issues, and so they are quite familiar with all these things that are going on. We have others that are excellent at doing research and analysis. Finance may not be their field, but they know how to dig through the numbers and figure things out. But we do have accountants and other professionals that are lending their expertise to analyzing all this data that we're being able to come up with. And these turnpikes just don't make sense. Initially, they were talking about it as a way to relieve traffic from Dallas to Tulsa, but that didn't hold water when we were able to analyze that route is already being used, Highway 75 and Highway 69 from Dallas through Durant, Matoka, and Muskogee already takes a major flow of that traffic, and it would be out of their way to take this new turnpike loop to get to Tulsa. So that didn't seem to make sense either.
I know you are inviting citizens to get involved. And
yes.
One of the things that impressed me today when I was looking at the websites and the Facebook page and all that, you are helping people understand what is the best way to talk to your legislators. So where do you direct people to go to learn about the issue so they can talk to their person?
Well, if you go to pikeoffota.com, there's a link that talked about the legislation, and it directs you to, we've got a list of some of the bills that we are interested in, and gives a brief description of those bills in the House and in the Senate. And there's quite a number of bills that we are paying attention to. But another thing that's kind of important to pay attention to are what's called shell bills. And a shell bill is a bill that typically doesn't have, it's empty basically, and can be filled in as the legislative session goes on. And if things come up, and we think that the Turnpike Authority probably has some people that are holding some shell bills for them to use based on what occurs between now and the time the legislature takes action. It's a long process. Bills at this point, I believe, go to committee, and then the committees hash them out and decide whether to send them onto the floor for approval. And if they get approval in one house or the other, then they go to the other house and through a committee. So it's a long, drawn-out process. And there's a lot of opportunity for changes and nuances, and that's why we're trying to keep track of it. And we have a lot of information on those things on our website. So just click on that link that says legislation, and it'll take you right there.
Nowhere have I seen any radical language or disrespect or any of that. And of course, the big headline lately was that you've threatened the lives of people at the Turnpike Authority. Would you like to respond to that?
Well, and I think that's sad that if anybody has done that, we certainly don't condone that. This is a process that, the Turnpike Authority dealt this hand of cards, and I never would have chosen to play it, but yet I'm in the game. But it's not, we're not, these people are just doing the job they think they're supposed to do, and we're just doing a job that is in opposition to that. I think any kind of a death threat or any kind of a threat whatsoever is totally inappropriate. That's not the way the process works, and we need to be respectful and courteous to everybody involved in this process. And there's just no room. There is absolutely no room for any kind of violence or threats or intimidation whatsoever on anybody's part on either side of this issue.
I think they've been watching Yellowstone. Randy Carter, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll talk in a month or so if anything else happens and you want to keep us up to date. I'd appreciate it. But I heard you say in 2023, there's a possibility that the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority's bonds will be insolvent.
I believe they've got a bunch of bonds that are coming due, and I believe that they said they were going to use new bond issues to pay those off. We'd have to go back and check their agendas from their meetings, but that is what I was told by some of our people doing research into their agendas and their finances. So,
the Facebook page, No More Turnpikes, okay, and Pike Off OTA, and we will look forward to hearing more from the Oklahomans for responsible transportation.